And good morning, everyone. Today is the 6th day of the month of Teves, and it's the 28th day of the month of December. This is our final class for this year, regular secular year. And we are in the midst of the book called The Art of Giving. And we are on page 14. On the beginning, all you need to do is turn one sheet over there and you'll find where we are today. This is the introduction. And so, again, you need to turn just one page on the sheets that you have, and you'll find page 14 in front of you. If you just turned your page, you will find page 14 in front of you. Right, okay, good. I just want to make sure everybody has the pages. We spoke last week at length about the author of this particular essay, and we began to study the introduction, which is where we are holding now. And we studied and we learned how the sages, how the Torah looks at the mitzvah of giving tzedakah, and it has in it everything. The Talmud says that it's equal to all other 612 mitzvahs. Those who were at the Yom Kippur service heard the sermon before the Yizkor about a person who did one kind act, tzedakah act in his life, and when he got up there and they were about to dump him somewhere, the tzedakah act all came and got him into the through the good door. We learned from the book of Proverbs where it says that tzedakah saves a person from death. And we learned the story of Rabbi Akiva, whose daughter, he was told by stargazers that his daughter was doomed to die in the night of her wedding. Instead, on the next morning, she finds a hairpin that she had stuffed into a hole in the walls, in one of her walls of her home, and it had pierced through the head of a poisonous snake. And her father said, because you did an unbelievable tzedakah act at your wedding, in the night of your wedding, which saved you from this death. So tzedakah saves from death, and the question that was presented right at the beginning, which we concluded with last week, was: is it better to give one big lump sum to tzedakah, or should one give on a daily basis? If one wants to give, let's say, $1,000, should one give the $1,000 in one shot, or should one say, I'll give 100 a day for the next 10 days, and that will be my tzedakah? That's a good question. You're giving the 1,000, but if you're not going to be able to give on Monday, should you just divide your 1,000 from Sunday through the next Tuesday, and then you'll have all 10 days? And this discourse emphatically claims, yes, that it does make a difference, and one should give every single day. If one has no ability, if one says, okay, Chabad is making a charity campaign, which is happening on Tuesday to Wednesday, and they need a certain amount of money for this time, well, then that's a different type of giving. But if you say, I'm only going to give on December 31st, and then for the next 3 months I can't give anything, well, then a person should be permeated with the mitzvah of tzedakah. Give a dime, give a nickel, give a quarter, give $1 on a daily basis. Just that mitzvah of the act of giving should be experienced on a daily basis. All right, so that's what we're holding on page 14 in the middle of the page. What is tzedakah? And again, this is an introduction. When we get into the essay, this will get into the Kabbalistic meanings of what happens in the other worlds when one does give. What happens when you give a nickel to tzedakah? And you're giving it simply because I want to give to a worthy cause, and what I can give today is a nickel. What happens? That starts when we begin the actual essay, which comes on page 25. But this is an introduction to the essay. So we are page 14 in the middle of the page. What is tzedakah? Tzedakah is not charity. It's only charity. No, I'm only kidding. Tzedakah is not charity. Charity implies an act that is noble, generous, and extraordinary. When you say a person is giving charity, well, a person is giving away from his or her hard-earned money, or even if it wasn't hard-earned, but it's money that they could use for whatever they wish. So giving that away for a noble cause is a noble thing. For a person to give something away from themselves. It's generous and it's even extraordinary because not everybody does it. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody is inclined to do it. It might be very difficult for people. Not because they don't have, just because they're not givers. Some people just are not givers. They can't part with the money. I was sitting on the plane on the way to Toronto on Friday, and I was upgraded to my first class seat, and so obviously I was sitting next to some person who could either afford it or also a frequent traveler. I think he had a mixture of both. And before long, we got to talk, and he is a Jewish man from Sarasota, Florida. And he runs a company that has to do with some kind of eye care. He deals with MDs. He doesn't deal with opticians. He deals with the doctors of the ones who deal with the real issues with the eyes. Anyway, and we had we ended up talking until he was able to take out his laptop and start writing letters. I mean, he's running the company. He was going away for a week on vacation, so he was doing his thing. But we spoke quite extensively. He turned out, this is how the conversation began. That's why I am able to excuse myself. He's a Red Sox fan. Bang! And that started. I said, well, I'm originally from Boston, and Sarasota. I said, I'm very, very sorry, and I'm actually sorry I'm sitting here because you must be a Red Sox fan. And he says, you must be a Yankee fan. And I showed him pictures of me at Fenway Park last year and the snow last winter, and I said, I prayed there that for the rest of time they should lose every single game. And thank God last year. Thank God last year they were the worst in the division. So that's how we started. And that, you know what? Once you do that, then the ice breaks, and then you can talk about anything. And well, then we were just bantering around, kidding around, and he happens to admire the Yankees, whatever. So we spent like 20 minutes talking about that. Then the door's open. Then you can start talking about whatever you want. And one of the things that he was talking about was that he said he lamented this. He's from a Reform congregation, but he goes. He's a goer. He says it makes me feel at peace when I go to synagogue. My children, he says, they go to Chabad from campus times. He says, but my parents, who had a lot less than me, gave a lot more than I do. And he said that generation. So I said to him, you know what? Israel was coming, and everybody knew and felt that this was important to support Israel. And there were other causes. There was the Holocaust people who needed help. There were causes that were globally Jewish causes. He said, you're right, but it's more than that. It's the art of giving. It's the act of giving that some people have done. And today's generation are not that giving anymore. They just don't want to give. So I said to him, why do you think they're holding on to their money? For what? He says, I asked myself the same question. I said, here's my card. No, I didn't say that. He did ask me for my card, not for a donation, but because he wants to deal, it's baseball related, but I don't care. As long as I get into a guy like that, who knows? He can help Chabad in Sarasota. Ultimately, that would be best for Sarasota, and I think he should get involved in it. Anyway, so the bottom line is that giving is a feeling. It's not just people who have it, therefore you give it. Not necessarily people who have it are going to give it. What's his name from Microsoft says, I want to give half of my possessions to a 10-year plan for in the UN or something. What a silly. Anyway, but he's giving half of his possession. Of course, he has 50 billion, so he's left with only 25 billion, which is, I guess it must be hard for him to buy bread and bagels. Anyway, but not everybody who has it is ready to give it. They just want to keep it and spend it on another yacht and on another plane, and on whatever, and more cars. It's sometimes people just, I earned it, I put it together, I want to keep it, and that's how some people are. So giving is not just giving because I have it. It's an extraordinary act to give something away that belongs to you and that you can use, and you can choose to use it for anything you want or give it to anything you want, and you've chosen to give it to a specific place, to a specific cause. You've decided to be a partner, to help them, to support them, because you feel like you're inclined to give them, but the inclination to give is not a given. Just because people have, not necessarily they're going to give. Again, tzedakah is not charity. Charity implies an act that is noble.
How do we teach our children to give? Is it just by monkey see, monkey do type of thing? I said to my kids, you got to give 10% needs to go to someplace. It's not going into your account, it's going to somebody who is less fortunate than you. And they bitch and moan, sorry. And no, I don't want to. Well, you're going to do it because I say to do it. Do you just keep on wearing them down?
Then they'll stop doing it.
Have you started?
I'm sorry?
When they don't have to listen to you anymore, they won't do it anymore because you're forcing them.
Well, I control the bank account, so
Yeah.
they have no choice.
Right. So you're forcing them.
Right.
But what you need to say is that there are certain things we do as Jews because that's what we do, because the Torah says so, because God says so, because it's the right thing. You need to explain that to them. Why is it the right thing to give? Because you can say that it's not.
They go on mission trips. They go to the Zabin shelter. They see it, but they still don't want to part with it.
Again, what you need to say to them, explain to them, is that not everybody has what to give. You're lucky that you have money, that there is an income. Now, some people don't have. They will try. They'll work their tails off, and they'll only get a job that pays them $35,000 a year. They're living on a tight string budget, and they don't have it. And there's no guarantee that anybody who goes through college or anybody who goes through anything will get it. There are people who haven't gone through college, who haven't done a day of work in their lives, and they're sitting on millions of dollars. God gives a gift. The Torah says, they will never, until the days of Mashiach, they will never lack. You will never lack poor people among you, says the Torah in the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. You'll never lack people who need. And since there will never be a lack, you are required to give because I am giving it to you on loan. When you give 10%, then you are doing what I want you to do, and then you can expect. This is the only time we say this for a mitzvah. You can expect to be recompensed for what you've given. Nobody loses from giving tzedakah.
But in lieu of that, I've always had
In
this
lieu?
question.
I like that word.
I've always had this question. You say 10%. What happens seriously if you are really a poor person and giving that 10% is taking milk and bread from your children's mouth, that you have to decide, do I feed my children or do I give to whatever charity? What's the answer to something
You
like that?
cannot give away, and we spoke about this last week. We can't give away and then go back on the dole, because then you're taking tzedakah, giving tzedakah, and then taking tzedakah. What's the point?
So don't do it.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of money that a person sits on that a person is exempted from giving.
You can give 1%. That's what I was wondering, does the tzedakah have to be 10% or God
The
says?
Torah says, give a tenth. It keeps on saying that. In fact, in one place the Torah says, aser to aser, meaning give 10%, give 10% double. So the sages say, what does that mean? Give. And the sages say the word aser, which is from the same word as eser, meaning 10, that's the first one. The second one, the ta'aser, is the same word, written the same way as ta'ashir. Give 10 for wealth. Give a tenth for wealth. And our sages say further, 10 is the minimum. the splurge of a person should be 20% if they want to give. In other words, a fifth of what you own. And if you're Bill Gates, you're giving half of what you own, 50%. But if a person can't afford to give, or that person is being given, imagine you had a guy who came to you every week and you gave him $1,000 for survival. And then you found out that he's giving $100 away for tzedakah. Now that's a little presumptuous on that side of that person, because he's not earning $1,000 a week. He's getting $1,000 a week. He's in a different category. So in other words, if you have a certain amount of money and you only have a certain amount, and if you have any less than that, you're going to have to need to get from other people. Well, then why are you giving it away? In other words, don't be a fool. These are the words of the sages. Don't be a fool to give too much if you only earn a certain amount. You say, well, I want to be good. I want to be really generous. I feel like I'm a generous person. I'm just going to give. That's not being generous. That's being silly. The person has to live with an account. Without an accounting, then they don't have a life. And then everything gets lost.
What do the sages mean when they say give a tenth for wealth?
That's what the Torah. They're teaching what the Torah says. If you want to earn money, give away to tzedakah. If you want more money, give to tzedakah. That's what the sages are
So
saying.
are they saying give over and above the tenth because the
No,
tenth
that's
is required?
give tenth in order so you should get wealthy. That's a tenth. So, but that's the minimum. The minimum requirement is to give a tenth of one's earnings to tzedakah. There are other. There's a maximum of a fifth, and in the Hasidic teachings it says that is when a person is on a regular situation. But imagine if a person has a health issue, and then there is no accounting. If you know that you have to get a certain medicine, that medicine is going to cost you $25,000 for the year, and without that, one won't survive the year. Then one will find $25,000 and cut it from somewhere. But one is not going to just say, okay, you know what? I'm just not going to have the medicine. I'm just going to die. No one says that. No healthy person says that. No healthy-minded person says that. The healthy-minded person says, I'm going to find that 25 no matter what. And so similarly, says in Hasidic teachings, when a person is spiritually needy, when a person is spiritually unhealthy, one should not worry about how much one has to give to tzedakah, because it spiritually does unbelievable amount of goodness to a person, as we will be discussing over here. What happens when a person gives?
We're playing musical chairs.
Yes.
You
I know.
talk about
My flight this morning was at 6:15. I left the house at 4 o'clock, and it's been sort of a bumpy ride. There was a long line. Toronto is just a very poorly designed airport, and you have to go through customs before you go. And there's long lines here. Someone sent me here, sent me there. I'm running around. I'm sitting in a plane. The pilot was about as nasty as I've ever seen anyone be in Delta. Really, I told him. I said, whatever happened to dignity and being cordial? I'm embarrassed. I said, I live in Peachtree City. He also does. I live in Peachtree City around pilots, and I love the pilots. And you have done a disservice to Delta. That's what I said to him as I walked in.
you talk about
So it's been, and then as things are happening over here. People are coming and going, and then people are talking.
you talk about tzedakah
Since
in
I'm
terms,
unsettled here today.
in-
Yeah, go ahead.
in terms of money and
Yes.
giving money. But can it always also be,
Yes.
if you can't afford it, that you give of yourself?
Yes, we're only talking about actually giving
Okay.
money. That's what the question was. Yeah, no. Of course, that's what he's saying over here. We began to say tzedakah is not charity. That's the first words here. And we need to get through to be able to finish this idea here. So tzedakah is not charity. Charity implies an act that is noble, generous, and extraordinary. And remember, even if you're giving $1 away, that is a noble act, because you're giving something that you could use for your own purposes. You're giving something away that you can buy a loaf of bread. You can live. Your soul can stay in your body if you kept that dollar and bought some food. But you choose to give that away. It's like giving away part of your life. Something that didn't have to happen and only happened due to the goodwill of the benefactor. That's what charity is. Tzedakah, on the other hand, doesn't mean charity. It means righteousness and justice. It's not all doing something. It's not at all doing something you didn't have to do. It's doing the right thing, the just thing. So in other words, a person can say, I don't have any money, but I can come in and wash your dishes. I can, instead of you paying for somebody to come in, I can do that for you, and I want to help. I could set up the tables instead of you hiring somebody in the shul. I can do it for you on every Friday. I'll clean up, and you don't have. That's my contribution. That's also giving. That's righteous justice. In other words, it's not necessarily giving from yourself, from your funds, but it's also giving of yourself. In the secular perspective, if you're not giving to charity, while you may be missing out on chances to be philanthropic, you're still not doing anything wrong. In the secular perspective, you didn't give charity. Who says you have to give? In the Torah it says, the Jewish guilt says we have to. But the secular perspective, you don't have to give, it's yours. It's your hard-earned money. No one requires you to give away some of your earned money. After taxes, it's yours. You can do whatever you want. It's a free country. In the Jewish perspective, if you're not giving to tzedakah, you're violating that which is right and just. Because tzedek means justice. Tzedakah means like a tzaddik, a righteous person. When one doesn't do that, one is doing one is not doing what is right or just. This completely different take on giving stems from the larger Jewish worldview. And here we're going to get into a little bit of what I was saying before. From the very beginning, the Torah teaches us that God created the world and put us here for a reason. He entrusted us to God and tend to His garden, His world, to be partners in creation, to help mend and fix a world that often appears to be broken. This is in the Midrash. The Midrash says this clearly, that we are partners in creation. We're here to look after the world and to fix that which is broken in the world. And an important part of that role is to be there for others in the time of need. Verse after verse in the Torah encourages us, demands of us, that we give to others when they are in need. Don't close your hand. Don't avert your eyes. Don't close your heart to your brother's cries. Give. This is in the same place where it says give in order to be wealthy, that same section of the Torah, Deuteronomy chapter, I think it's 14 or 13. It's around 13 or 14, where it says very clearly, there will never be a lack of poor people. You must open up. It says patoach tiftach. Open and open your hand. And don't feel bad because I'm giving it to you and you're giving it to them. You're just the messenger, because that's what the extra earnings is, a gift from God for you to bestow onto other people. Which is why we never lose from giving, because the giving is not really giving away something that belongs to you. It's just been entrusted. That's the word he used over here. Entrusted to the person. God gives us life, health, and resources, and asks us to share a portion of those resources with others in need. To not do so is to violate the very term of our life contract, which is, I'm going to give you, and you need to pass it along. Elsewhere in Hasidic teachings, I'm not sure if he says it over here, I don't think he brings it up over here, but the first Rebbe of Chabad writes that in the book of Psalms, Psalm number 89, it says, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, that the world is built on Chesed. The world is built on kindness, being kind, Chesed. So the Rebbe says, the first Rebbe writes this, he says, a simple translation is that the world runs because people are kind to one another. People are giving to one another. But he said, if you look into the world itself is saying this. If you look at earth is the most giving of things. You tread all over it. It cradles the earth. It cradles the world. The water is in it and everything is in it. It grows from it. It gives sustenance and life and shelter to the insects and to the birds and to many of the animals who are running around looking for something to pull out of the ground or dug into the ground. And then the plants give to the world, to the earth. They give back to the earth, and they give to the ones who are higher than them. So the cows are eating the grass, and the monkeys are eating the fruits, and so on. And then the animals are giving back to the earth and to the grass, and they are also providing to the human beings. And the human being, the highest of all, is responsible for all the other three. To take care of the animals, take care of their vegetation, take care of the earth, not to destroy it, and to be sustained by it. So everything is giving here. Everything should be giving. We are taking, but we are also giving. So the other animals are just giving by being who they are. That's how they give back. They don't know what, there's no consciousness, they're just doing what they do, but that by doing it so, they're designed to give back. The human being, though, has a conscience, and he is required, as the Torah says, to look after the world, to fix the world, to take care of it. That means everyone is taking and everyone is giving. That's how the world is set up. The whole world reflects kindness and the give and the take back and forth. Having a tough time with us?
No, I'm good.
All right.
As long as I'm breathing, I'm here.
There you go. Furthermore, so he says until now, God gives us and we are expected to give back. Furthermore, our tradition tells us that God gives us extra resources for the express intention of us in turn paying it forward to others. We get extra, so we should be able to afford to give to others. 9/10 of what we earn is intended for us, and 1/10 is given to us in trust for others. If we were to keep the entire amount and not give the requisite amount to tzedakah, we would be misappropriating the deposit that has been entrusted to our care, which certainly is a grave offense to the divine depositor. Now look at number 8, which is the obvious question that I was expecting, and I'm sure somebody's thinking about it now. As for why God does not give the money directly to the needy, but instead gives us a little extra and then asks us to give to tzedakah, this is one way in which God allows us to be active partners in creation. There is no reason that we can give the giver and the taker. Why one has to be the giver, one has to be the taker. But the giving and the taking is the partnership in creation. And in one generation, in one incarnation, one can be the giver. And in the next one, the same two can be taking from the other one without even knowing. One can grow up as a taker, as someone who has to take. There is a mitzvah at the end of the 3rd book of the Torah, which is giving 1/10 of all newborn animals once a year. And it's to be taken to Jerusalem. This mitzvah doesn't only applies in Israel and only obviously people who have animals being born. But it's 1/10 of the animals that are born have been born throughout the year. And the way it works is, and the Torah says this, which is a most unusual thing. There's a Good Shabbos email article that I wrote about this. The Torah says, take all of the animals, gather them into an enclosure, and then one by one let them out. And you count 1, 2, 3. This is actually what you need to do. And the 10th one, 1, 2, 3, 9, and number 10, you put some kind of a paint on it. You mark it. So that one is a 10th. And you keep the line going, and then at the end you collect all those that have marks on it, and those are the 10th. And the obvious question arises, Torah is telling us how to give the tzedakah like this, and if I don't do it that way? That's the requirement of this mitzvah is to actually count the animals. And if you don't count them, you can't take the 10th. This is the only way you can do the 10th. What do you mean? I can just go out there and let me estimate there's 100 over there. Okay, so I'm not going to give 10. I'm going to give 15. So 5 extra just in case. No, you have to appoint. This is the way you appoint the particular animal as a number 10. Why is that? And in the article I wrote, and it doesn't, I don't think it's I think I got it from some other commentary, a very profound and beautiful idea. And that is because you have 100 animals, not that much. You're taking 15 animals. Could you imagine? Those animals can have others. They can provide meat. They can provide milk. There's a lot they can do. 15 animals, a lot of animals. So the Torah says, go count 9 before you give away your 10. 9 is a lot more than that little one. The way this will be done, when you see the animals in front of you, and you see 1, then 2, that's all mine. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all right, 1. Okay, now you can get a better perspective. It's not that the end of the world. If you look at it from the 15, 15 is a big amount. But if you look at it from the counting 9 and then 1 for God, well, then 9 to 1, that's a pretty good deal. It's okay. And that allows you the perspective of saying, oh, wait a minute. I know now that I'm going to get in return. I'm holding on to a lot in return. That's a good thing. And when it comes to animals, it's easier to do that because they're all walking around anyway. So that's what it means, the perspective of giving. It means that we are giving something that was gifted, entrusted to us to be able to give away to some needy cause. Here comes the mystical dimension now. All of this speaks to the practical element of tzedakah. That's what we do. We live like this. Judaism is based on this. But there is a mystical dimension as well. To understand this, we need to look at the process of creation as described in Kabbalah and Hasidus, and Hasidic teachings. Creation is the product of dueling forces, of constriction and expansion, of darkness and light. If you look around, you see that there are 2 forces here. There's the force of no good and there's the force of good. And no good can manifest itself as darkness. For some people, darkness is a terrifying and difficult and challenging time. For some people, winter. They have these phobias. They can't seem to get out of themselves. They want to see the sun, and all you see is this. On the plane this morning, about 8 o'clock, 45 minutes before landing, I said, we are closing everything down because our heavy, thick clouds from West Virginia. And put on your seatbelts, and it's going to be a little bit of a rocky ride. And we didn't see land until about 10 seconds before we landed. So the entire thing was shaking. You didn't know what was going on until it gets down. Some people don't appreciate that. I was sleeping away. You know? I was on duty last night. I performed until 1:30 in the morning, and I had to leave the house at 4. So I only slept about an hour and a half, and so I was on the plane. In fact, the flight attendant said to me, "Oh, you had a good nap there." And I did. I feel like I slept the night. But for other people who didn't sleep a wink, and including some who were sitting next to me and kind of carrying on the whole flight, these were people who were holding on to each other. So some people just don't like that type of. They feel they'd rather not fly from October till May, because it's cloudy and thick, and then snow and ice and rain and miserable and so on. Some people don't even like going out. It's cold, it's chilly, it's not nice. So there are dueling forces in this world. It's a duality.
God bless you.
One more. Now that did it. Okay. So you have the 2 sides here, a constriction and expansion. We spoke about constriction and expansion in the last essay at unbelievable length. And darkness and light. This is the template God used in creating the world. So half of it is dark and the other half is light. And nighttime is dark, and the other time, and the daytime should be light. And it is true in virtually every form of creation and its derivatives. A teacher who wishes to convey a big idea to her students. Interesting that a teacher is a her. So a teacher that wishes to convey a big idea to her students, or creating, if you will, knowledge within the students, that's a form of creation, must first limit and define the idea before she shares it. You cannot go into a classroom and say, I'm going to talk about God creating the world, and it's the constriction and limitation. Well, what's constriction? What's limitation? What's God? What's creation? How do you define all this? You have to break it down. You may understand it. You may have learned it. You may have be very comfortable with it. But if you don't have that plan, call it the lesson plan or whatever you want to call it, you're not going to be able to properly transmit it to the students. Otherwise, it will likely be unintelligible. They won't get it. And they certainly, even if they get it, they certainly won't be able to apply it to themselves and to transmit it further. But just constraining the idea is not ideal either, as that too poses a great challenge. If the constraint idea is too packaged, too disconnected from the source, the students might never really understand the bigger idea. If you're just going to give them a storybook from a child, and not explain to them that this is really a metaphor for something else, they may never really understand what you're trying to teach them. So if it's too packaged, if you get too involved with the story and less involved with the idea, then the idea is lost. They'll get the story because the story is a children's story or whatever, but they won't get what you're trying to say. So you've got to package it properly. And therefore this constriction, and how much do you hide and how much do you give? How much do you withhold and how much do you give? How much do you hide and how much do you reveal? This is, and how do you do it? At what stage do you do this and what stage do you do that? I have this when I write the Good Shabbos email. I know the idea, but how am I going to present it? Is this coming first or is that coming first? Or this part of it or that part of it? These are all ways of transmitting ideas to other people. You want to transmit it in the way that the person should understand it, but they don't want the person for it to be so watered down that a person will only understand the metaphor and not really get the point that you're trying to make. Sometimes, for example, a teacher can only convey an idea through a story or a parable, which is a form of constraint. Because if you have to tell a story to explain yourself, then what you're really doing is you're breaking it down into a story. The danger, though, is that the students may get so caught up in the story that they fail to get the real message. It's like the people who tell me, my good friends and my family specifically, my siblings, my children, we read the Good Shabbos email every week. When the story ends, as soon as it says, and this is connected to the portion, we move on to something else. And well, the only reason why the story is there is to draw the person in, so they should say, now how is that connected to the portion? The part of the portion is only about a page. It's not that long. It's the story that everybody wants to see, though. What crazy thing did Rabbi Lou get up to this week?
Yes, but they have so much knowledge from the Torah, they may not need to be reminded about the connection.
Amen. I wish. They have a lot to learn. The truth is, I studied this. This is not something that I suddenly woke up with. When I'm finished with the previous week. I finished on Thursday this week. Thursday afternoon, my head is already into this week's portion. I'm already thinking ahead, and I'm just going to spend the whole week on this. This is not something that I just it popped into my head. I'm studying it. I'm learning it. And now I would like to share it with other people. But I have to learn it as well. I don't know it.
Well, isn't it more like a refresher for you? It's not that you don't know it. Except that you're a different person every day. So the fact that you're a different person every day, you might look at it in a different way, even though you may have read it last year too.
It's the same Torah portion.
But you're a year older, a year wiser.
I hope I'm a year wiser. I'm into that.
And
But
your perception reading it this year opposed to last year is a different message.
Might be different.
I finish sometimes in certain tough Torah portions, and I say to myself, I don't know how I'm going to get through this next year, because this one I thought I squeezed everything out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And after 10 years of writing, it's still going on. I'm talking about, so every once in a while I'll do a redo, but generally speaking, it's a new material every week. And it's every single week. And so when the portion, after you've done it 7, 8, 9 times, and sometimes, oh, that's a good idea. Then I open up my previous one and say, oh, you've already done that one. You can't go there. And so you do have to study things, and you're right, because somehow it does happen. There's no end to Torah. It's an endless thing.
It's a living thing.
Yes,
It's
correct.
living.
Correct. The Torah is alive, precisely, because it comes from God who is infinite and living, and so therefore it's the living Torah. And it provides lessons all the time. But you don't see it, maybe because you're a year wiser, or because you didn't look that way, or when you saw something that you thought about, you said, no, that's too deep, or too esoteric, too mystical, or too controversial, whatever it is. Sometimes I see something and say, nah, not for this time. No, let's move on to something else, another idea, another thought. And so people who don't want to study what I've put in the study part of it, they just want to read the story for fun, are not interested in studying to begin with. They're just interested in fun. I know my siblings. I know my customers. I know some of my customers, the ones who are close to me, the ones who are not afraid to tell me whatever I need to hear, or whatever they think I need to hear. Anyway, so sometimes I just, my brother tells me, oh, I saw, he said, I read your passport. The passport is the way to get into the border, but I didn't get in. I didn't go into the country. He tells me that often. So hey, listen, you got to try. You got to work. You got to keep on keeping on. And that's all right. So the bottom line is, when you're teaching and you are watering it down too much, or when you're providing a story, so sometimes you have to conceal that story inside somewhere, so that they have to read the whole thing in order to get to the end of the story. And then, all right, so that's teaching. That's more than just simply. When I started teaching the 7th graders Mishnah, I was teaching them the Talmud, and I wanted to introduce them to the idea. We were learning about laws of finding lost objects, which seem a very simple civil law, but there's a lot of complications. As in anything in the Talmud, there was all kinds of scenarios in this. So I had found a Reader's Digest article about an experiment that they made in big cities, in small cities, and in tiny cities. And they dropped a wallet or whatever it was, and they waited 3 different types of people, one who gave it back, ones who were looking for something, whatever it is. And I said, okay, today we're going to read an article from the Reader's Digest. What? Wow. Aren't we reading the Mishnah? I said, yep, but right now, I just want to have some fun. Come on, Julie, you start. And that's how, everybody would read a little paragraph, and we'd talk about it, and I would ask them, what would you do, and everything else. Now, once they got that into their heads, I said, now let's see what the Talmud has to say about it. At this point, they were ready to go.
They were hungry.
Yeah, they were, yeah, let's see what indeed, that's what I thought. This is what the Reader's Digest thinks. Now let's see what that's how I introduced it to them in a way that they couldn't wait to see what the Torah has to say about it.
Thirsty.
Right. Okay. So you have to be, if you're a teacher, you have to package something properly. So you have to water it down, but you can't go too far. If you water it down too far, then you lose the, you lose the forest, as the saying goes. So the solution then is for the teacher to open up a channel between the story and the idea that spawned the story, revealing to the students some of the bigger picture. As you are telling them the story, you're actually planting in them the ideas, the concepts of what you're trying to teach. First, constriction and darkness, which means concealing the energy and the light of what you're trying to teach. Then, expansion and light. I had somebody come over to me on Thursday. I was at a bris in Atlanta. I had taught his wife in 6th grade. She must be in her mid-30s by now. It was about 20 years ago. And And he tells me that my wife today is an observant Jew because of you in 6th and 7th and 8th grade. I said, thank you. I really appreciate the compliment, but that sounds a little bit exaggerated. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. She says, no, she says this all the time. And the reason why she says it is because she saw your enthusiasm. It rubbed off on her that you're living this. You're not just teaching it. It's part of your life. I'm not going to get into what he said, but the bottom line is that when you're a teacher, when you are when you're conveying ideas, you're teaching ideas, you need to plant within them something, not just teach them the material, but you need to teach them the material that they could use it, that they could go with it, and they could water the seeds and grow their own garden. That's what a teacher does. That's an educator. An educator is someone who doesn't just teach, but also guides, directs the student to a certain way, in a certain way. Okay, so that's the example that we're talking about. Now, this is a metaphor within itself, a teacher. What's the outcome over here? What's the message of that story of being a teacher? When God created the world, he first employed constriction and darkness, which he calls tzimtzum. The word tzimtzum means to constrict in Hebrew. God limited his pure, infinite light to allow for diverse creatures who self-identify. That means that you have a world here that when you look out at the world, just take a look, turn around, look outside, there is no God out there. You have to find him, but he's not apparent. And there's millions of diverse creatures, and each one of them looks like a creature and doesn't look like God. But they all are part of God. The little ant and the grass and the worm and the bird and the fish and the animal and the person and even the stones and the water and even the lifeless matter, it's all God. It all came from him. And none of it can you see God. In none of it. Which means that there had to be an unbelievable constriction in order to get to the point where everything really conceals on the godliness that gives it its energy, its life. And this was the theme basically of the book that we just finished, the 4 worlds. That each world is another level of constriction to bring it down to this point. This is the end. We are at the bottom of the barrel. This is where God wanted to go. This is what he had in mind when he designed the creation of the world. And our purpose is to indeed find the God within this world. And to do away with the darkness or the constriction or the restrictions. And that is by doing the mitzvah. That's why the Torah tells us, I want you to do this, and I want you to eat this, and I want you to wear that, and these are all ways of uncovering, of recovering, of revealing the God that's within them. It's an elevation of the whole world. That's how it is. So God begins with a constriction. Without that, there wouldn't be a world like this. It would be another world of God. It would be like the upper worlds, where God is very clear, very apparent, very obvious, and wherever you look, you feel or you perceive God. In this world, he wanted it not to be that way. And he wanted us to be faced with challenges in how to find the light through the darkness, and sometimes we don't manage to find them. Or sometimes we even fail to find them. Sometimes we don't want to look. Or whatever. So this world begins with constriction. The big world begins with a symptom, the taking away, the carving away the light. God limits his pure, infinite energy to make what we have here. Yet, constraint alone did not fulfill God's purpose in creating the world. God wished not just for created beings that know themselves, but for created beings that know themselves to also know him. Not that the Creator, so we all know ourselves, and the squirrel out there also knows itself. It knows who it is, it knows what it needs, and runs around to get it. We know ourselves from even a deeper perspective. We also know the talents that we have, and we also know the abilities that we have, and we know the restrictions that we have. We are aware of ourselves very well, but God wants us also to be aware of where we came from, of who made us, who put us here, and why we are here. This was, in fact, the entire purpose of creation, for us self-aware creatures to know God. That's why he creates this world. What does he need all this for? What does he need to create a world where evil prevails in so many different ways? For what? People are hurting. Other people are hurting other people. People are suffering. People are sick. Who needs this? Does God want this? Obviously he does. If he didn't want it, it wouldn't be here. So then why would he want it? And so, of the several reasons that are offered by the sages, a big reason is because he wants to give us the opportunity. It's a chesed. He wants to bestow upon us the ability to become higher. The achievement. This world is all about achievement. Those who don't achieve are out in the streets. They're homeless. They just can't get out of there. Either somebody's able to support them or they're out. It's either you're on a slide, you're on a slope. You're either up. If you're not challenged by climbing up, the upward climb, then you're slipping down. And that's why God wants to give us, and he empowers us. And some people have done extraordinary or miraculous things in this world as a result of the pure talent that they have somehow found within themselves. And all the great achievers that we have in any kind of field, these are people who took what they had and expanded it, and then benefited the world from it. The world. You can invent something. You can think things. You can be an Einstein. There's so many things you can do. You can be the Lubavitcher Rebbe. You can just turn around the world by empowering other people, using the talent that you have, that we have, to turn over the world. That's ultimately what God wants. To make your mark by making this world better. You are a true partner in creation. To achieve this required more than just divine constraint. It required a measure of divine revelation as well. Not just darkness, but light too. So God opened up the apertures of heaven to allow just a glimmer of his infinite light to filter into his creation. Now we might know not only of ourselves, but of our Creator as well. First darkness, and then light. So the way God created this world was to remove, but at the same time also to reveal something, which is similar to a teacher who has to take away the intensity of the knowledge that she or he may have, and then begin to shine it in and to plant some ideas and some thoughts or some direction within the student, so that the student in him or herself can eventually develop it within and get it, and become even surpass the teacher.
I've learned different ways of teaching, and there's a way of asking the children, let them give you the idea. In other words, you say to them, now what do you want to study? What do you think of this? And let them expand it instead of us expanding it. It's really amazing.
And our sages teach in the Talmud. I have learned a lot from my teachers. I have learned even more from my friends, but I've learned the most from my students. And I can tell you that that's 100% true. All right, so let's just finish the next paragraph here, on 17. This is the natural state of our reality. a combination of self and God. That means we know ourselves, but we also get God introduced to ourselves. Of darkness and light. But God also gave us a tool to force open the heavens to allow more of His infinite light to flood in. There is a tool that we can do that and get more than what we think or what that we perhaps are expecting or preparing for. That tool, say the mystics, is the mitzvah of tzedakah. When we break out of our natural self-contained selves to consider and care for another to the point that we actually share that which is ours with others, that action elicits from on high a powerful surge of godly light that breaches the natural created reality. Just like we break ourselves and we say, no, we're going to give more than what we think that we are comfortable with, so too that opens up the door. And God says, I will give you more than what you think you even deserved before. This light illuminates the world at large, not just to the person, but out there, and the benefactor in particular, garnering much blessing and divine beneficence. And the degree of the light is commensurate with the degree of the tzedakah act. The deeper one digs within oneself, and the more generously one gives, the deeper and loftier the light that is called forth. And based on all of this, we would expect that it is preferable to give a larger lump sum to tzedakah than to give smaller amounts more frequently, since in doing so, one elicits a much more powerful godly revelation. Because, I'm going to give the 1,000 now, and that's more than than I was comfortable. I thought I was going to give 900, now I'm going to give 1,000. All right, so now I'm going to open up the door wide. Yet, this is not the case.
This doesn't apply to money, it also applies to act.
Yes, act, obviously, the act, the feeling. And what? Next week.
Tuesday night here, 7:30.